The morning sun barely peeked over the tall buildings as Sarah stepped onto the busy city street. She was an older woman with gentle eyes that had seen many years. Today, however, her usual cheerful skip was replaced by a slow, thoughtful shuffle. She was on her way to court, a place she rarely visited, and her heart felt a little heavy. Sarah wore her oldest, most comfortable coat, a soft gray one that had seen better days, and a simple knitted hat pulled low over her silver hair. Her shoes, though clean, were worn, and a small, slightly crooked bag hung from her arm. She looked, to put it simply, a bit messy. Not dirty, but certainly not dressed for a fancy court building. People hurried past her, their crisp suits and shiny shoes a stark contrast to her humble appearance. Some barely glanced her way, while others offered a quick, dismissive look. Sarah didn't mind. She had learned long ago that true worth wasn't found in new clothes or expensive things. When she finally reached the grand courthouse, its stone walls looming large and serious, she took a deep breath. Inside, the air was cool and quiet, filled with the hushed sounds of important business. Sarah found the right courtroom and slowly pushed open the heavy door. She walked in, a small, unassuming figure in a room full of sharp, important-looking people. Her arrival barely registered with anyone, except for a quick, almost amused glance from a man sitting at one of the tables, a man with a very fancy suit and a very confident smile. He was the lawyer, Mr. Black, and he was about to learn a very important lesson. Sarah found an empty seat near the back, her small frame almost swallowed by the large wooden bench. The courtroom slowly filled, and the judge finally entered, bringing everyone to their feet. As the proceedings began, a case was called involving a small business dispute. Sarah listened carefully, her gentle eyes following the speakers. Then, Mr. Black, the lawyer with the fancy suit and confident smile, stood up. He was a tall man with slicked back hair and a voice that boomed. He started talking about the case, using many big words. As he spoke, his gaze drifted towards Sarah, lingering on her old coat and simple hat. A sneer, quick and unkind, touched his lips. "And I suppose," he said, pausing dramatically and looking directly at Sarah, "we have all sorts of interesting individuals present today, some perhaps more accustomed to simpler surroundings than this esteemed court." He chuckled, a harsh, dry sound, and a few people in the room shifted uncomfortably. He then went on, "One might even wonder if they understand the complex matters discussed here, given their rustic appearance." Sarah felt a small blush creep up her neck, but she kept her eyes steady. She had come here for a reason, and she wouldn't let a mean man's words push her away. Mr. Black continued to talk, but now and then he would glance her way, his eyes full of scorn. He even mimicked a slow, simple way of speaking when describing the other side of the case, clearly poking fun at what he imagined Sarah's own speech might be like. He thought he was very clever, but Sarah just watched him, a quiet knowing in her soft eyes. She knew this man was not only unkind, but also deeply mistaken. The judge, a kind-faced woman named Judge Thompson, finally looked towards Sarah. "Ma'am," she said gently, "do you have a reason for being present in this particular hearing? Are you a witness, or perhaps involved in this case?" Sarah slowly stood up, her movements calm and steady. Her voice, though soft, carried clearly through the quiet courtroom. "Yes, Your Honor," she began. "I am here because I have a deep interest in how justice is served, especially when it involves smaller businesses and individuals. I believe everyone deserves a fair hearing, no matter their size or status." Mr. Black, who had just sat down, scoffed loudly enough for many to hear. He rolled his eyes, a clear sign of his disrespect. "An interest in justice, is it?" he mumbled, loud enough for Sarah to hear. "More like someone with too much time on their hands, looking for a free show." Sarah ignored his rude comment and continued, "I also represent well, let's just say I represent a party who is keenly observing the conduct of all involved here today, especially the legal representatives." She spoke with a quiet dignity, her eyes meeting Mr. Black's briefly, a flicker of something he couldn't quite understand in their depths. But Mr. Black wasn't listening. He leaned over to a colleague and whispered, loud enough for Sarah to catch, "She probably thinks this is a play, bless her simple heart, talking about keenly observing as if her opinion matters." He chuckled again, a grating sound. He thought he was being funny and smart, but his words just showed how unkind he truly was. Sarah, however, remained perfectly composed, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips. She understood far more than Mr. Black ever imagined. Judge Thompson, whose patience was wearing thin, cleared her throat loudly. Her voice, usually calm, held a firm edge now. "Mr. Black," she stated, her eyes fixed on him, "I remind you that all persons in this courtroom are to be treated with respect. Your comments and whispers are out of order and will not be tolerated." Mr. Black, caught off guard by the judge's sharp tone, straightened up quickly. He offered a quick, insincere apology. "My sincerest apologies, Your Honor. I merely meant to suggest that some matters are perhaps beyond the grasp of certain attendees. No disrespect intended, of course." He gave a small, fake smile that didn't reach his eyes, and then, as the judge turned her attention back to the case, he couldn't resist. He cast another glance at Sarah, rolling his eyes dramatically, as if to say, "Can you believe this old woman?" Sarah saw it all, but her expression remained serene. She simply watched him, a quiet knowing in her eyes. The judge, busy with the legal papers, didn't see Mr. Black's continued rudeness, but others in the courtroom did. A few people frowned, clearly unhappy with the lawyer's behavior. They could tell he wasn't really sorry. Despite the judge's warning, Mr. Black seemed unable to control his unkindness. Every time Sarah shifted or made a small sound, he would sigh loudly or shake his head. He thought he was being subtle, but his actions only highlighted his bad manners. He was so busy trying to mock Sarah that he wasn't paying full attention to the judge's words or the important legal discussion happening right in front of him. He was digging a deeper hole for himself, completely unaware of the huge surprise that was about to come. The case was nearing a break when Sarah decided it was time. She had listened enough. She had seen enough. With a quiet, deliberate movement, she reached up and slowly untied the ribbon on her old knitted hat. She carefully took it off, revealing not messy hair, but a perfectly styled silver bob that shimmered under the courtroom lights. Then, with the same calm grace, she unbuttoned her worn gray coat. Each button released with a soft click, drawing a few curious glances from those nearby. Mr. Black, busy whispering to his colleague, barely noticed. As the coat came open and then slid gently from her shoulders, It revealed a stunning, perfectly tailored navy blue suit. It was made of fine wool, cut in a modern, elegant style, and looked very expensive. A delicate silk scarf, the color of a spring sky, was tied neatly around her neck. Underneath the simple clothes, Sarah was not a rustic old woman at all. She looked sharp, powerful, and utterly out of place for someone who had been wearing such humble clothes just moments before. Her shoes, no longer the worn pair she arrived in, were sleek, polished leather pumps. Her small, crooked bag was replaced by a designer handbag that sat on the bench beside her. A ripple of surprise went through the courtroom. People gasped softly. Mr. Black, finally looking up from his notes, saw Sarah transformed. His sneer faded, replaced by a look of utter confusion. He blinked, then blinked again, as if he couldn't believe his own eyes. The simple woman was anything but. Sarah now looked like someone important, someone who belonged at the head of a very big table, not hidden in the back row of a court. The atmosphere in the room shifted entirely as all eyes turned to her, waiting. The judge, her eyes wide with surprise, stared at Sarah. "Madam," she began, I don't understand." Sarah, now radiating quiet power, met the judge's gaze. Then her eyes swept over the room, landing for a moment on the stunned Mr. Black. "Your Honor," she stated, her voice now firmer, clearer, and more authoritative than before. "I apologize for the disguise, but it was necessary. I am not simply an interested party, as I initially claimed." She paused, letting the words hang in the air, allowing the sudden hush in the courtroom to deepen. Every eye was on her. Mr. Black looked as though he had seen a ghost, his mouth slightly open. His confident smirk was completely gone, replaced by a look of dawning horror. "My full name is Sarah Kensington," she continued, her voice resonating with unmistakable authority. "And for those who are unfamiliar, I am the founder and CEO of Kensington Legal Services." A collective gasp swept through the room. Kensington Legal Services. It was one of the biggest, most respected law firms in the country, a giant in the legal world. Mr. Black himself worked for a company that was a subsidiary of Kensington Legal Services, a fact that made his jaw drop even further. He had been mocking his own boss, the very person who owned the company that paid his salary. The air crackled with shock. Sarah, the humble old woman, was actually a titan of industry. Her eyes, still gentle, held a sharp intelligence that had been hidden beneath her unassuming facade. She had not only revealed her true identity, but also the incredible power she held, a power Mr. Black had so carelessly dismissed. The courtroom was utterly silent, waiting for her next words, knowing that everything had truly changed. The name Sarah Kensington hung in the air like a sudden clap of thunder. Mr. Black, who had been on the verge of standing up, seemed to freeze in his seat. His face, usually a healthy pink, drained of all color, turning as white as the court papers on the table before him. His eyes, which had moments ago held a mocking glint, were now wide with pure terror. He tried to speak, but only a small, strangled sound escaped his throat. His perfectly slicked back hair seemed to droop, and the fancy suit he wore suddenly looked ill-fitting, like a costume on a frightened child. The realization hit him like a tidal wave. He had not just been rude to an old woman, he had been shockingly disrespectful to the very person who signed his paycheck, the person who controlled his entire career. The CEO. His hands, which had been so confidently gesturing earlier, now trembled visibly. He nervously fumbled with his tie, as if it were suddenly too tight. Sweat beaded on his forehead, catching the courtroom lights. He looked around wildly, as if hoping for an escape route, but there was nowhere to go. All eyes were on Sarah, and then on him, a silent judgment filling the room. The confident, arrogant lawyer had completely vanished, replaced by a scared, pathetic man. He couldn't even meet Sarah's gaze. The power had shifted completely, and he knew it. Every rude comment, every sneer, every eye roll he had directed at her now came back to haunt him, flashing through his mind like a terrible, unforgiving movie. He was utterly terrified, knowing his fate was sealed. With all eyes on her, Sarah stepped forward a little, her presence filling the silent courtroom. Her gaze, though calm, held a serious weight as it settled on Mr. Black for a moment, then swept across the faces of everyone present. "I came here today," she began, her voice clear and strong, "not as CEO Sarah Kensington, but as a concerned citizen. I wanted to see, with my own eyes, how the legal process works for ordinary people. More importantly, I wanted to observe how the lawyers who work for my company, Kensington Legal Services, conduct themselves in court." A low murmur rippled through the room. The judge leaned forward, listening intently. Sarah continued, "It is very important to me that every person, no matter their background, wealth, or appearance, is treated with respect and fairness. My company's reputation, and indeed my personal values, are built on these principles." She looked directly at Mr. Black, who seemed to shrink in his seat. "I needed to know if our lawyers upheld these values. I needed to see if they remembered that behind every case are real people with real lives, who deserve kindness and dignity." Her voice softened slightly, but her message was firm. Sometimes the best way to truly understand is to experience something from a different point of view, to step into someone else's shoes, even if those shoes are a bit worn. The reason for her disguise was now perfectly clear. She hadn't been trying to trick anyone. She had been gathering honest information. And what she had found in Mr. Black's behavior was deeply troubling. The courtroom waited, holding its breath, for what she would do next. The silence in the courtroom was so thick you could almost touch it. All eyes were on Sarah, waiting. Mr. Black, his face still pale, was practically glued to his seat, looking like a deer caught in headlights. He couldn't speak. He couldn't move. Sarah's gaze once again fell upon him, but this time there was no kindness, only a steely resolve. "Mr. Black," she said, her voice cutting through the stillness like a sharp knife, "your behavior today has been unacceptable. You have shown a complete lack of respect, not just for the individuals in this room, but for the very principles of fairness and dignity that my company stands for." Mr. Black finally managed to stammer, "Madam Kensington, I assure you, it was a misunderstanding. I didn't know—" Sarah held up a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. "It doesn't matter if you knew who I was, Mr. Black. What matters is how you treated an old woman in simple clothes. My company does not tolerate such unkindness, such arrogance, or such disrespect from its employees." Her voice grew even stronger, echoing with authority. "Effective immediately, Mr. Black, Your services with Kensington Legal Services are no longer required. You are fired." A collective gasp swept through the courtroom. Some people covered their mouths in shock, while others exchanged wide-eyed glances. Mr. Black's jaw dropped, and he looked utterly devastated. The color returned to his face, but it was a deep, angry red mixed with humiliation. He had been so proud, so full of himself, and now, in front of everyone, his career was over, all because of his own mean spirit. Sarah, however, remained firm, her decision unwavering. Justice, in a very personal way, had just been served. With Mr. Black's stunned silence hanging heavy in the air, Sarah turned her attention to the rest of the courtroom. Her voice, though still firm, took on a thoughtful, almost teaching tone. "What happened here today," she said, sweeping her hand to include the entire room, "is a powerful reminder for all of us." She paused, letting her words sink in. It doesn't matter if someone wears a tailored suit or a worn-out coat. It doesn't matter if they speak with big, fancy words or in a simple, straightforward way. Every single person who walks into this courtroom, or any place of business, or any corner of our community, deserves to be treated with fundamental respect. Her eyes, now sparkling with a deep wisdom, connected with the judge, then with the other lawyers, and even with the spectators in the gallery. We often judge people by what we see on the outside, by their clothes, their jobs, or how much money we think they have. But true character, true worth, is found within. It's found in kindness, in honesty, and in how we treat those we perceive as lesser than ourselves. She continued, "My company is built on the idea that justice should be fair and accessible to all, and that means our representatives must embody that fairness in their actions and words. If we lose sight of basic human decency, then all our clever arguments and fancy degrees mean nothing." The message was clear, not just for Mr. Black, but for everyone listening. Sarah wasn't just firing a lawyer, she was teaching a lesson about life itself. Judge Thompson, who had been listening to Sarah with growing admiration, finally broke the silence. She looked at Sarah, her face filled with deep respect. "Madam Kensington," she said, her voice clear and strong, "I must commend you. Your approach today was truly ingenious." A small, knowing smile touched the corners of Sarah's lips. The judge continued, "To go to such lengths, to assume such a humble disguise, all to witness firsthand the conduct of those in positions of power. It shows not only great wisdom, but also a profound commitment to justice and ethical behavior." The judge then looked around the courtroom, her gaze sweeping over the now thoughtful faces of the other lawyers and spectators. "And the lesson you've imparted, Madam Kensington," she added, her voice echoing with conviction, "is one that every single person in this room, and indeed in our society, needs to remember. Respect is not earned by a title or by wealth, but by the simple act of treating every human being with dignity." She nodded at Sarah. "Your clever plan has not only brought a serious issue to light within your own company, but has also served as a powerful reminder to this entire court. It is a lesson that will resonate long after today's proceedings are over." The judge's words were a high praise, acknowledging the bravery and intelligence behind Sarah's actions and the lasting impact of her message. Sarah simply offered a small, graceful bow, accepting the judge's heartfelt words. The atmosphere in the courtroom had completely changed from one of hushed shock to thoughtful admiration. After the judge's heartfelt praise, Sarah turned her attention back to the current court case. The original dispute involved a small bakery owner, Mrs. Gable, who was being sued by a much larger corporation, the very one Mr. Black had been representing. Mrs. Gable looked tired and worried. Her shoulders slumped. Sarah walked over to Mrs. Gable's table. "Mrs. Gable," she said gently, "I apologize for the behavior of one of my firm's representatives. It was truly unacceptable." She then turned to the judge. "Your Honor, with your permission, I would like to make an immediate change to the legal representation for the opposing side." The judge, still impressed by Sarah, nodded. "Granted, Madam Kensington." Sarah then looked around the courtroom, her eyes scanning the faces of the other lawyers. Her gaze settled on a young woman named Emily, who had been sitting quietly, observing the proceedings with a look of genuine concern. Emily was known for her kindness and her sharp mind, even though she was relatively new to the firm. "Emily," Sarah called out, her voice clear, "please step forward. You are now appointed to represent the corporation in this matter, and I expect you to approach this case with fairness, integrity, and a deep understanding of the human element involved." Emily, wide-eyed and a little shaky, quickly moved to the table, gathering her papers. She knew this was a huge opportunity and a huge responsibility. Sarah then leaned into Mrs. Gable. "Don't worry, dear," she whispered. "Emily is an excellent lawyer, and she will ensure you receive the fair hearing you deserve." A wave of relief washed over Mrs. Gable's face, a small, hopeful smile replacing her worries. The scales of justice were already beginning to balance. The story of what happened in Judge Thompson's courtroom spread like wildfire. First, it was the lawyers and court staff whispering in the hallways. Then, the news reached other law firms, the legal community, and quickly, through word of mouth and local news outlets, the entire city. People couldn't believe it. The famous CEO, Sarah Kensington, had gone undercover to test her own employees. Everyone talked about Mr. Black and how he had mocked the simple woman, only for her to reveal her true powerful identity and fire him on the spot. The story became a cautionary tale, a reminder that you never truly know who you're speaking to. But more than just a shocking event, it sparked a citywide conversation about something far more important: kindness and respect. Suddenly, people were more aware of how they treated others, especially those who seemed less powerful or important. Lawyers were seen being extra polite to their clients, regardless of their financial status. Shopkeepers greeted every customer with a genuine smile. The story made people pause and think, am I treating everyone with the respect they deserve, or am I judging them by their outside appearance? Sarah's actions and her powerful words about inner worth had touched a nerve. It wasn't just about a rich boss firing a rude employee. It was about the idea that everyone, from the humblest street sweeper to the highest executive, deserved dignity. The courthouse, which had witnessed so much drama, had now become the stage for a lesson that resonated far beyond its walls, encouraging everyone to look deeper and act kinder. The courtroom drama and Sarah's powerful message didn't just fade away. For Sarah Kensington, it was a call to action. She didn't stop at firing Mr. Black and making a speech. She took concrete steps to ensure her company truly lived up to its values. She called for a meeting of all senior partners and lawyers at Kensington Legal Services, sharing her experience and reinforcing the company's core belief in respect and fairness for all clients, big or small. New training programs were put in place, focusing not just on legal skills, but on empathy and ethical conduct. lawyers were reminded that every client, every opposing party, and every person in the courtroom deserved to be treated with dignity. Sarah herself made surprise visits to different offices and courtrooms, sometimes in disguise, sometimes openly, to keep everyone on their toes and ensure her message was truly sinking in. She made sure that cases involving smaller clients, like Mrs. Gable, received the same dedicated attention as those from large corporations. Emily, the young lawyer she had chosen, became a shining example of the kind of lawyer Sarah wanted: smart, fair, and kind. Emily's career blossomed under Sarah's mentorship, proving that good values could lead to great success. Under Sarah's watchful eye, Kensington Legal Services became known not just for its legal victories, but for its compassionate approach. The company's reputation for being fair and kind grew, drawing in clients who valued integrity as much as results. Sarah had shown that leadership wasn't just about making money. It was about building a company with a heart. The story of Sarah Kensington became a legend, a whispered tale of how true leadership and power aren't found in flashy displays or harsh words. It was a simple yet profound lesson that echoed through the halls of justice and beyond. Sarah had shown everyone that day that money and fancy clothes might give you a certain kind of power, but it was goodness, integrity, and treating others with respect that gave you real, lasting strength. Her actions proved that a kind heart and a strong moral compass were far more valuable than any expensive suit or loud voice. She had used her immense power not to bully or boast, but to teach, to correct, and to uplift. The change she brought about in her company and the wider community was a testament to this truth. People remembered Mr. Black's downfall, but they remembered Sarah's wisdom and kindness even more. The little bakery owner, Mrs. Gable, eventually won her fair settlement, thanks to Emily and Sarah's intervention. She often spoke of the kind old woman who had quietly changed everything, never forgetting the lesson that true heroes don't always look the part. And so, Sarah Kensington, the CEO who dressed like a simple woman, left a mark not just on the legal world, but on the hearts of many. Her story became a timeless reminder that judging a book by its cover or a person by their outward appearance often means missing the most important parts of the story. True power, she taught, always comes from being a good person.